Well, let's bring Mike Sielski in, who wrote an awesome piece today, which we've been talking a lot. I said, quite frankly, I played baseball. I coach baseball still, although not this year, although we might. I don't know. I've been told we're going to try to play. I like coaching and teaching the game, but I don't like watching the current product. Is it the current product? Mike writes a column confessing the hard and sincere truth. I used to love baseball. I don't like it anymore. I don't care if baseball ever comes back. The game is boring. Mike Sielski joins us now from the Inquirer here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Friday edition. Michael, how are you?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Great piece. Makes it kind of like if you think you're a baseball fan or maybe you're teetering, you read this and you're like, maybe I'm not as much of a baseball fan. Do you put it in the context of I don't like what's going on, or the style of play, or it's just kind of gotten monotonous to the game itself? I mean, what led you down the road of I don't really care if baseball comes back?
Well, it doesn't have as much to do with the impasse that the players and the owners are in right now. It has more to do with the way the game has evolved, or I would argue devolved over time, particularly the last 10 years. I grew up a humongous baseball fan. I was a baseball beat writer as recently as 2010 and 2011, working up in New York, which is the baseball city in the country. That was all great. But within the last, like I said, 5 to 10 years, I feel like the sport has changed to the point that I don't find it interesting anymore. I don't like the homogeneity, the way that every team plays. It tries to play exactly the same way. With every single pitcher, it seems, throwing 95 to 100 miles an hour, with every single hitter swinging from his heels with launch angle and trying to hit home runs. One of the things that I loved about baseball right up until, I'd say the early 2010s was the variety of approaches. There were teams that played a certain way because of their ballparks or tradition. The Yankees would look for left-handed hitters that would try to hit short fly balls out to right field in Yankee Stadium. And the Cardinals were always built around speed. And you had all these different kinds of pitchers and windups and batting stances, and there were stolen bases and triples and all these things that we're told now are inefficient. Tack onto that the fact that a game takes 3 hours and 5 minutes on average. The pace is glacial, and I find more and more that when I watch a game, it's because I have to and not because I want to.
Mike, you mentioned a lot there. No, by the way, the word approach I have brought up on this show virtually all week. The approach is out the window. The approach is just so bad anymore. It has really watered down the product to where I agree with you. It makes the product almost unwatchable. But, the last time they had a labor strike, people said, I'll never go back. And then we know the 98 home run thing that we just saw chronicled on ESPN this past week kind of brought some people back. But you can't do that anymore. Is there something that can be done to kind of reset baseball?
I really don't know, Mike. I'm not one for kind of re-legislating everything about the game, and they've tried things to speed the game up, but it's more of a cultural sort of thing. It's become part of the fabric of the game for a batter to, look at 8 to 9 pitches every single at bat, no matter what situation. To get into account, take the typical situation of what I'm talking about. Runner leads off an inning with a double. So the next hitter up, let's say, is the 7th or 8th hitter. Traditionally, that hitter would try to hit the ball on the right side of the infield to get the runner to third base. Now, is that necessarily the most efficient thing to do? Is that necessarily the most productive thing to do? No, I acknowledge that it's not. It's probably better over the long term, or even in that moment, for that hitter to try to get a base hit, try to hit a home run. But the bottom line is that back when hitters tried to hit the ball on the right side like that, the game moved faster. And it was strategy that every single fan was familiar with and could understand. The other aspect of the way the game has changed is that we are inundated with numbers now. I mean, I love numbers in baseball, but I don't love them this much. And I certainly don't feel like I need a graphing calculator to be able to follow the game. And I know I'm sounding like, an old man who's yelling, get off his lawn. But sports are supposed to be enjoyable and relaxing. They're not supposed to engage you intellectually to the point that you just tune out.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a problem with how much they use analytics. I feel like it's definitely hurting the game. And Gil and I were trying to come up with some sort of plan to make baseball more exciting. And I threw out this idea, although I don't think it's going to work, but it's the only idea I could possibly think of is if they do ban the shift, you might be able to get more hits in the infield and more action, more ball in play. Now, when you look at what happened in the 90s with McGwire and Sosa, it was exciting because of the home run. This would be taking away the home run, so I don't know how that will work, but I just feel like if you ban the shift, you will then have players maybe using the diamond differently when it comes to their approach at the plate.
I think that's possible. Actually have the fielders play in their positions would be a refreshing change. On the one hand, I can see why teams would want to shift. If you have data that tells you, this left-handed hitter hits the ball into the right field corner 45% of the time, of course you're going to put your right fielder in the corner and move your center field over. That's fine. But this gets to my complaint about the game now, is that there's very little risk-taking in the game anymore. And part of the reason we watch sports is for the inherent risk-taking or the athlete overcoming the insurmountable obstacle. Take the Eagles' Super Bowl victory over the Patriots, okay? You didn't have to be an Eagles fan to appreciate Nick Foles, backup quarterback, stepping in for the prospective league MVP, playing out of his mind and beating Tom Brady, the best quarterback ever and the best dynasty ever. That's a great story. It's something you don't expect. And baseball has gone out of its way to kind of minimize situations like that. Part of the drama of the game used to be, hey, can this starting pitcher finish his complete game? Can he get through this tough spot in the top of the seventh inning? Nowadays, managers are so quick, based on the data, to take the guy out of that situation because they know, well, once a starting pitcher gets through the sixth inning, the percent chance that he's going to get through the lineup the third time or the fourth time is XYZ, and so they take the safe way out. And it has made baseball boring.
Mike Sielski, Philadelphia Inquirer here. You mentioned strategy. It's a word that I think is lost in baseball, but you hear about the DH. And people, I kind of went on this rant yesterday that the DH is for baseball fans who really don't even like baseball. Baseball is about the strategy. The DH takes the strategy out of the game. And the weird part is, last year, the average runs per game in the American League were about exactly the same as the average runs per game in the National League. So the DH essentially isn't really adding more offense. So is the DH something that baseball thinks will help people say, look, we added the DH to the National League, there's going to be more offense?
Yeah, I do think baseball thinks that it will help. I'm not sure it will. As I said in the column, I think it's a half measure. Just like I think that, people complain nowadays, you'll hear writers and people who cover the sports, every time an old-timer says, I don't like it when these batters who hit a home run stand at the home plate and celebrate themselves or throw their bats and all that stuff. The problem isn't that hitters are throwing their bats and celebrating themselves when they hit home runs. The problem is that all they're doing is trying to hit home runs.
Yes.
And to be quite honest, the game had more personality years ago when you had players like Ricky Henderson, who was going to steal you a base and who was flamboyant on the field. When you had, knuckleball pitchers and submarine pitchers, the game had more variety and it was more interesting back when there were these kind of competing, individuals and individual philosophies about trying to win. Now everybody tries to win and tries to play pretty much exactly the same way. And until there's a market inefficiency for trying to, exploit that, I don't know that the game changes. And even if it does change, I'm not sure it's going to change for the better.
As we keep going year by year, all of these sports, they transform. And let's look at the other side, because the pitching. Is it possible that the pitching has gotten so good that that's almost affecting the way that people are now approaching the plate as well? I mean, is it possible that maybe the pitching is so hard to hit because these players have so much nasty stuff with their sliders, changeups, curveballs, and things like that, that maybe that also affected the way that people look at the approach?
I think that's probably part of it. And I think Jeff Passan from ESPN in his book, The Arm, gets into that, not just about injuries to pitchers, but the fact that that's where the money was, so that, better athletes became pitchers, guys who could throw 95, 100, more than 100, got the big contracts, and they were who teams wanted. But again, that gets back to my point. Like, you're probably right in that against a pitcher who throws 95, you might be better off just trying to swing from your heels and make good contact and have it go a long way. But I'm not sure that's good for the game. I just don't. I mean, maybe I'm weird, but I liked having pitchers around Major League Baseball who you couldn't figure out how they were getting guys out. Whether it was somebody like Tom Glavine, who seemed like his fastball couldn't break a paper bag, but got guys out for years and years. Greg Maddux the same way, that there was more of an artistry to it that made the game, to me, more interesting. You could still have guys throwing 95 to 100 like a Nolan Ryan or a Roger Clemens, but the variety was what made the sport interesting. And, I'm talking about stuff like the way the guy stands at the plate. Everybody looks the same now because everybody's trying to accomplish the same thing.
A lot of it is, we talked about this as well yesterday, Mike. Mike Sielski's our guest here. If you're a pitcher, not only are you throwing harder and have nasty stuff, I said the pitcher now doesn't have to get the batter out. The batter's getting himself out because their approach is so bad.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think pitchers have reams and reams of data now, too. And in some situations, the batter doesn't even matter. All they know is, if this guy's up, here's where I'm supposed to throw it. Back to the point of whether the pitching is too good, in some ways it is, because managers are so quick to take a pitcher out of the game and put in a fresh one. And so many of those guys can throw so hard that in some situations it probably is harder for a batter. Would you rather face the tired starter in the top of the eighth, or would you rather face the fresh reliever who throws 97 with an 85-mile-an-hour slider? There's a lot at work here, guys. All I know is I used to relish watching baseball every night. I loved it. I don't love it anymore. I watch it because I have to, because it's part of my job. I would much rather sit and watch an NFL game, an NHL game, college football, the NBA, college basketball, anything. If you gave me my choice, I would choose all those things ahead of baseball anymore.
Let me get your quick opinion on attendance and ratings, because we say baseball is declining. It's a sport that isn't as popular, yet the attendance and the ratings, what do they suggest? How much of a rope does baseball have here before they start to look at themselves in the mirror and say, not only do we have a problem with attendance and ratings, if they do, but now we have a financial issue because they're making more money now than ever?
Yeah, they are making more money now because baseball is a regional sport predominantly, and it still has cachet in the big markets, in New York, in Boston, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, places like that. The TV ratings for the World Series last year, and it was a great World Series between the Astros and the Nationals. You had the sport's ultimate villain against an upstart. It went 7 games. It was great. Lowest TV ratings in history for any World Series. Attendance dropped last year and has been dropping steadily for the better part of 20 years. So there are really disturbing trends here. And, I think one of the things that gets missed is that baseball is a sport that gets passed down from one generation to the next. I became a baseball fan because my dad was a baseball fan, and he talked to me about the sport. I knew who Jackie Robinson and Mike Schmidt and Johnny Callison were because of my dad, at least initially. And if baseball loses a generation of fans, it's going to lose successive generations of fans, because that's the nature of the sport. It is built on tradition. It is built on kind of being handed down. And I think that's a real, question and problem that the sport is going to have here.
It is a very intriguing situation for baseball right now. Mike Sielski, read the full article at Inquirer.com. Follow Mike Sielski. You can check it out there as well. And obviously, baseball's got its own issues with this going back and forth, where if you don't love the game and this is going on and they say, well, it's the first thing on, I'll just watch it because it's back, which might not even happen now with all that's going on. They have to sell you in that moment, and when you turn this game on, people might be like, I'm not all that excited about what I'm watching right now. So they're at a very interesting spot, and we'll see. How do you feel, Mike, about the possibility of where baseball is and getting back with the news that came out today with the Phillies and other teams? I mean, does this just seem so far-fetched?
Yeah, I think any league now is going to be reluctant to come back. I mean, I don't know what precautions each of these leagues can reasonably take to make sure that these players are COVID-free. I mean, because even if these guys, take the guys who contracted it and tested positive with the Phillies, even if they're symptom-free and, they're in quarantine for a few weeks or a couple of weeks and then they come back, we don't know who else has it and is carrying it and who they've come in contact with. And we don't know who might get sick from it, who really might get full-blown, the kind of symptoms that can be really dangerous. So, there are liability issues here at the yin-yang. Today was a real setback, I think, for sports everywhere, and the idea that they're going to come back anytime soon.
Mike, we appreciate the time. Have a great weekend, pal. Stay safe.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Enjoyed it.
Mike Sielski, read the full article and kind of get a deeper version of it where he says, it's interesting. It's something I can relate to so much. As I said, I played baseball my whole life. I still coach. I still love coaching. Like, I would rather, Broads, sit and watch a high school baseball game than a Major League Baseball game.